Every business problem you're ever going to encounter, I don't care if you're a one-person business or you're running, GE, every business problem is a human problem. When we think about how humans work together, when we address things from a level of human comprehension, we're going to solve a lot of business problems.
If you're an introvert, you don't have to become an extrovert. You don't have to become somebody who does a different type of work to move forward. No, you can be the best at what you do and you can move forward. But you need to have leadership that understands how this all works together.
How is understanding strengths important when navigating different personalities in leadership?
So our strengths inform our contributions, how we're going to contribute. They also inform then what we need in order to show up.
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, everyone, once again to Real Talk with GrowGetters. Growth-minded go-getters looking to crush it in business and life. I like to consider myself one of those people, and I don't know everything about all topics. That's why we started these discussions, these panels, so we can dive into very nuanced topics with professionals that are oftentimes way more experts at that specific thing than Ben is himself. And today we're talking about navigating different personalities in leadership, navigating different personalities in leadership. I'm welcomed with three incredible partners, peers on this discussion. And I want to give you each a short opportunity just to introduce yourselves. Nermine, you're next to me on my screen. So say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Ben, thank you so much for having me today. I'm Nermine Zakhary, your strengths and positive intelligence coach. And I am super passionate about helping people see their unique gifts and own their value. For me, the focus is about shifting the conversation from weakness fixing to strengths building. So that's what I do. I help people kind of really figure out who they are so they can own it, then go do it on purpose. And super excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have Nermine. You've done a strengths assessment with me, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it was really provided so much clarity for me in what I'm strong at and how I can show up better in the world. So I'm excited to have you, Nermine, and I want to pass it to Gerianne to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Gerianne Puskas, I'm the president and CEO of Mission Advancement Group. And I just recently started my consulting agency after 30 years in the philanthropy world in Rochester. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to continue my growth journey and learn from a lot more experiences, a lot more people. And I've really been enjoying it. And I have the opportunity to work with people to help them find their potential and their future career path, the organization's future strategy, and to help them build their future. And so I'm a person who is very positive, likes to find the future. And so I really help to build those strategies for both people and organizations. So it makes me very happy and I love it.
And I'm happy to have you. Part of why I think Gerianne's awesome for this panel is you do have 30 plus years experience, but now you're moving into a new endeavor, which a lot of us go through that at some point in our life. We have a corporate experience or we've done one thing. Now we're doing something brand new, but we can take all that experience with us. So I'm excited to have you. And our third guest today is Brian. Brian, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ben. My name is Brian Rollo. I run Brian Rollo Consulting Group. It is a training, coaching, and consulting company. And my focus is mostly on working with leaders in companies and working on workplace culture. So I've been doing this for a while now, and I love it. And personality certainly is a big part of this. Every coaching conversation I have usually starts with this. I'm sure we'll get into the different methods of assessments and all those sorts of things, but it starts with trying to understand this. So I'm so glad to talk with you about this today.
Yeah, excited to have you, Brian. I mean, you're dealing firsthand with workplaces on their culture. So we'll talk high level, but we're also going to get pretty tactical today. And I think you're going to be a great person who's in the weeds doing this at your consultancy. So I'm pumped. Let's start with strengths, because that just seems like a strong place to start. Because when we talk about personalities, leaderships, we're going to have different strengths. And Nermine, we'll kick it off to you. How is understanding strengths important when navigating different personalities in leadership?
So our strengths inform our contributions, how we're going to contribute. They also inform, Ben, what we need in order to show up. So oftentimes how I might contribute is indicative of something I might also need in return. For example, as a relationship builder, I need authenticity. I'm a great listener. I also need someone to sit down and have a good conversation and listen to me. Strategic thinkers provide us with vision. They need that high level why and what in order to show up. So how that helps in managing diverse personalities on a team is being able to understand each member of the team, have those conversations. How do you like to contribute? And then talk about, well, what frustrates you? And that will be indicative of perhaps a need that they have. And the more that we're open and talk openly about these things, the more that as a leader, I can invite those amazing contributions and give my team an opportunity to show up at their best, and also be mindful of the environment that I'm creating for them. That I'm fostering a place where their needs can be met. I'm more mindful of that and can support them in that way, and encourage the team as a whole to support each other in that way as well.
Let's shine some light and brag a little bit with strengths. I want to hear from Brian and Gerianne what some of your strengths are and how that helps you show up better as a leader. Whoever wants to go first, or I'll call on Brian.
I can go. I'm unmuted.
Go ahead.
I would say some of my strengths have to deal with being very future focused. And even in a time of crisis, I can remain extremely calm, and I can pull out where our strengths as a team are, right? This is what we have control over. This is what we're good at. Let's work on this. And if we have a gap, let's find someone who can help us fill that gap, because we don't want to run in circles trying to do something we can't do. So I find that those are some of my strengths. And as Nermine was talking, I was thinking about how the strengths in the team and using those and talking to folks finding those through observation, right? I'm watching people work and seeing, when are they smiling? When are they performing in a speedy, efficient way where they are enjoying their work, as opposed to the kind of slower, I'm just doing my work kind of thing. And that's where I try to find that sweet spot and talk to them about that and say, I noticed you were enjoying your work. You were happy and you were moving forward. You're high performing in this area. And do you want to move more forward in this area, because there is a career in this direction, and start to have those conversations. So it's really important to understand those strengths. And some of it is observation, because some people don't even know where those are.
So true. Brian.
So I'll answer your question by saying, and I don't usually think about this. Nobody's ever asked me this question before. I'm used to asking other people this question, Ben. So here, I'd say one of my strengths that I've learned through doing this kind of work is that I'm very project and goal focused. So put a project in front of me and I will not rest until it's done, once I believe in that project and accept it. And so that obviously is a great thing to have, a great personality asset to have at some point. But, and I don't know if I'm getting ahead of ourselves, sometimes it's not so great. Sometimes it has, the language I use is a shadow side. And so one of the reasons I like Nermine's approach, what she said about really thinking about the strengths, is when I do this work with people, we talk about the strengths of a personality type, or archetype might be a word I would use. And then we talk about what we might call the shadows. How does this show up not so helpfully? And what I found is a lot of people have a tendency, once we do that, to really beat themselves up about the shadows. Like, oh yeah, I failed because of this. I see how this has come out so negatively in my life and work in the past. But really, the most powerful thing we can do is acknowledge those, yes, but let's not forget about the strengths that come with our personality, and remember to lean into those as well.
I'll quickly share. I scored, when I took an assessment, number 1 in input. I'm a collector of data and ideas and informations. That's why I show up and do this podcast, to get diverse perspectives, to sift through all the crap and get the best solutions for the audience, for the listeners, for my clients. Everyone seemed to nod when you were mentioning the shadow, Brian. I don't know what that means. So can we go a little bit deeper on what that means for someone who hasn't heard that term, the shadow?
Yeah, sure. So to throw it way back, Carl Jung, I think, was the first person to introduce that terminology. He said, basically, there's a set number of personality archetypes. I think that foundation, one way or the other, is what we still build on today, whether Nermine's using it with strength finders or any of the other things out there. It's just sort of built on the idea that there's these different personality types, or archetypes was the word he used. And he said, guess what? Each one of them has some really good things, but each one has some things that tend to repeat when those people are under stress or not at their best. And he called those the shadows. So
interesting
question.
So another thing that I was curious about, I have no clue what you're going to say, Brian, but we'll go to this. You had mentioned personality conflict, and if there is such thing as a personality conflict. I don't even know what that means. Is there such thing as a personality conflict? What is that?
That's a great question. So in my work, I get called in a lot of times to work with managers who are having trouble with their teams. I'm sure Nermine and Gerianne have had this kind of situation too. And well, what's wrong? Well, these two people just don't get along. They have a personality conflict. And when you label something as a personality conflict, it becomes really difficult to change, because I can't reach across the room and change somebody's personality. I'm pretty good, but not that good. I can't do that. And if you dig a little deeper and think about it, a personality conflict, if we use that term, is really an actions conflict or a behavior conflict. Because you might have the personality where you love data, but how would I know that? I know it when you express it and act on it.
Yeah.
So people working together, they can have great personalities or different personalities. When there's become a conflict, when somebody is acting typically in a negative or shadow way, and that behavior is affecting somebody else. So we can just take away that label, personality conflict, and say, well, we're really talking about a behavior conflict here. Let's take away the excuse of personality, even though it may contribute to why somebody is doing that, and refocus on what's actually happening between these two people that's causing the conflict.
Well said. Anything to add here?
I can add a little bit, because that kind of makes me think about when, one of the things that I had kind of put forward was to think about when it comes all about personality, and when people use that as an excuse to not work with certain people. And if that person's an introvert, we don't want them on the team because they're not going to contribute, not realizing that they just need maybe a day to process all of the data and all of the things coming in and come back with meaningful contributions to a project. And so how do we take the information, and how do we work with the two members of the team, perhaps, to say, okay, how can I communicate with you? How do you want me to deliver this information to you? And how can I accept it back from you in a way that we can work together positively going forward? Because the energy that we're putting into it negatively is getting nowhere for the organization. So how can we agree on this mode of communication for each other, and how we're going to work with each other and come up with these, norms for this? And I think that really helps when you have an agreement an understanding of how you're going to communicate and work with each other. And both sides need input on that. It's not one way.
Let's go a little deeper on this, Gerianne, and I want to hear from everyone on this. Like, give a tangible example or a couple tips on, we've got different personalities. I'm working with someone with a completely different personality than me. Maybe there's a little rift-raft. How do I address that with them? How do I make sure we have a cohesive, quality relationship? Maybe I don't like the fact that there's riff-raff. We'll start with you, Gerianne. Let's get really tangible. What do you do in a scenario like that?
So when you say riffraff, you're talking about just people kind of talking about each other. I don't like the way this one's working with me. And so here's a really good example. I was working with someone, and we could not communicate. It was very frustrating. I tend to communicate in a theoretical, visionary, broader way of communication. This person is a very bottom line, down to the numbers, data-driven person. So we would get together and talk about the project, and we would miss the communication of how the team is doing because that wasn't very quantifiable with numbers, and I would not be able to be providing the right numbers to the other person. And so we would walk away feeling like this isn't working. And so having to say, what exactly do you need from me, and how do you need me to present this to you so that we can move forward? And this is what I need to hear from you, and how I need to hear, because I need to know that the team is okay. I need to know these things, the performance of each person. But I had to be very clear, and we had to say, okay, so going forward, every Monday at 10 o'clock when we meet, these are the expectations of communication that I have for you. And it made it so much smoother. But it was really difficult. And honestly, to start that conversation, to think about having that conversation is the hardest part, because you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to bring up how we have to communicate. And so, there's anxiety behind it for any leader. I don't care if you're a CEO, if you're a vice president, it doesn't matter who you are. There's anxiety and thoughts behind it, and it builds up in your head. The sooner you sit down and have the conversation, the better. And it will be done, and you'll find that you're both happier. And be very explicit, be very clear. I think it was Brene Brown, clarity is kindness. Just be extremely clear in what you expect from each other. But do it right away. Don't let it fester. Don't let it.
I want to hear from everyone. We'll pass it to Nermine and maybe even focus on the strengths end of things, or you tell me, what do we do?
No, as I was listening to Gerianne, I am thinking there's also an opportunity to celebrate the other person in having this conversation. So this is a gift that these are talents that you bring, and they're critical in our work together. And please keep bringing them in order for us to move forward. I'd love to know more about what you need, in order to contribute the way that you do. And let me tell you a little bit more about how I also, I'm visionary, and I am more strategic in my approach. I need things to be a little bit more high level. So would you be able to help me get there? So it's a conversation, celebrating each other's gifts, and knowing each of us bring things that the team needs. So that's I love how you approached that, Gerianne, with your colleague, and see that clearly it's made a difference, and also that you didn't sit on it. You had the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. And I will say you're exactly right. The words "I need you because of who you are" will diffuse almost any argument.
Ooh, say that again.
I need you because of who you are. You compliment me. And so that just really tightens things up.
Absolutely.
I want to text my girlfriend that right now.
There you go.
That was beautiful.
Ben, can I build on that a little bit?
I'd love to. Yeah, please.
There's a concept in when looking at strengths, this idea of strengths, our strengths lens, that each of us we're wearing a lens through our strengths that allows us, really is what informs how we show up, right? How we operate, the decisions that we make. What's our easy button? You know, where do we go, especially when we have a problem? And there are 34. For folks that may not be familiar with the CliftonStrengths, there's an assessment that ranks all 34 of your strengths in order, in the order of dominance. So imagine there's 34 strengths. There's in front of you, in your primary domain in front of you, there are say seven to 10 that you really have clear access to. Numbers 11 through 16, 17 are kind of in your peripheral view. They're secondary to you. You have access to them. You'll pull them in when you need to. And then the rest of them, beyond 17, roughly in that number, all the way through 34, are kind of more where in your blind spot. Can't really see them or access them or even understand them. So when you have colleagues that are explaining have strengths that might be in your blind spot and vice versa, that's where that clash can come, because there is a lack of understanding. And intellectually, we know that, Ben, you have different strengths than I do, and you're going to show up and operate differently than I do. But we get caught up in the differences and can't really see how to go from that place of where I'm just tolerating to a place of how can I be more accepting? And now I'm getting to a place where I value the gifts that you bring, because you have that strength that sits in my blind spot. You're able to do the things that I can't. You see things that I don't. So it's that visual, I think, really helps us understand that when your strength sits in my blind spot, oh, that's why I don't get it. How do I get a little bit more curious so I can learn and then eventually get to that place where truly valuing what you bring?
So powerful. Brian, I know this happens a lot in the workplaces you consult with. Add on to what we got going, or provide a new tangible example of what it looks like. There's riffraff, there's personality differences. What do we do?
I might do both if that's okay.
Please do, yeah.
What Nermine said, she said something really powerful there, and I want to build on it and maybe, give my own spin on it. I love what she said about the blind spot. In my language I use, we call that latent, a latent archetype. Again, to get really fancy, it just means this personality approach, this view of life that, again, doesn't come naturally to you, doesn't come easy to you. We all have them. And I think the big part that I really want to agree with Nermine on is self-awareness makes a huge difference, because although we might not easily have access to them, and although we might not even know they're there until we think about it, it doesn't mean we're incapable of using them. And sometimes the best thing somebody can do is realize they have the blind spot and say, you know what, I've got this problem in my life. I've got this problem at work. Maybe I should have been leaning into the blind spot a little bit, because what I've been doing hasn't been working. And so I just think that concept, again, is powerful. And sometimes people don't recognize that. No, I'll give you a quick story. This is sort of a funny one, actually. I was working with a team. I was working with a whole team, but I knew coming in 2 people were not getting along. One was a younger gentleman, and one was an older gentleman. The younger one was excited to work. The older guy had sort of been one of these grizzled veterans, good intentions. I've been around the block. He wasn't actually the boss, but people sort of treated him like that. He sort of acted like that because he'd been around for so long. You know what I mean? And so these two were having a conflict, and we did the personality assessment without going into all of the details and names of things like that, the archetypes. I asked the young man, what are some of the strengths on you see the world? And after he did the assessment, he says, well, one of the things I really believe about myself is that, I stick up for the common person. I stick up for those people like me, us young people. One thing I can't stand is when people in charge try to tell me what to do. He says, I can't stand when people at highest society, and then he went on about some societal things. These people at the top of the chain, they want to boss around people like us. I asked the older gentleman, how do you see the world? And he did his. He says, well, one thing I'll tell you, these young kids got to learn how to take orders. They should know the chain of command. And of course, who would have guessed that these two people would have a conflict, right? Once we did the personality assessment, it was like, I just wonder they hadn't killed each other yet. So what do we need? We needed a little bit of self-awareness, to use a term Nermine and Gerianne have been using. They needed self-awareness of their view of the world and realize that their view of the world, while being totally legitimate for them, was not everybody's view of the world. And that we need not only self-awareness for ourselves, we need to realize how other people can see the world a little bit differently. And there was common ground between these two folks. They both wanted to do a good job. They both had the best intentions. But they let these differences sort of get in between them. And so that was an interesting story. And I don't know if they ever became best friends, but we got them so they could work together.
So we don't have to be best friends. Talk, Brian, we'll start with you. I want to hear a little bit about authenticity now, and being authentic in the workplace. And is there a power in that?
Thank you for asking me that question. So I learned this lesson, again, sort of a little funny story, I think. Early on in my career, after I first started this, I was doing a workshop on communication for a bunch of HR professionals. And we got into communication, what ways work, how to talk to people to influence good behavior. And a lady at one of the tables, I'll never forget, she raises her hand and totally threw me off course. She says, well, you can sit here with your fancy slides, Brian, but what you don't understand is that I'm just the kind of person who tells it like it is. If I see somebody that I don't like, I tell them. If I see somebody that's doing something wrong, I tell them. That's just who I am. That's my personality. And I said, well, you don't really have to do that, but I have to. I want to be honest myself. That's what I have to do. And so just imagine, by the way, an HR person at your company who treats people this way. I said, well, how's that working for you? She says, nobody talks to me. I don't know why. Like, again, who could imagine, right? That would happen to somebody who just goes around telling people whatever happens to be on her mind. So it sort of derailed the conversation. And we had a good conversation, but I've done some thinking on it since and run into this situation many, many more times. One of my favorite quotes on that, I think the gentleman's name was Gordon Allport, if I can get this right. But he said something I use in my work every time I talk about personality. He says, personality is tendency, not destiny. Personality is tendency, not destiny. In other words, we all have tendencies to act in one way or the other, but we aren't destined to do it, right? If she had gone in and been nice to somebody instead of being mean, like, she wouldn't have exploded. Like, her voice works. She could have done it. She wasn't destined to treat people in a poor way, but she had sort of created the excuse for herself that she had to. The story she was telling herself, so I'm going to be honest with everybody, that means I say what's on my mind without any regard for how people are going to hear it. And she called that authenticity, but what it was really doing is harming her. And she had sort of put herself into this trap. So when I work with people, to come back to your question, I frame it now like this. It's always important to be authentic to your values, but you don't have to be authentic to any particular behavior to live those values. You can be flexible with your behavior and authentic to your values. She values honesty, right? Which it sounds like she sure did. There's different ways to be honest with people. It doesn't mean you have to tell them the worst thing that's on your mind, right? You can adjust your behavior and still be authentic to your values. And so I think that concept has been very helpful for me and some of the folks I work with.
So we've been talking a lot about personality and strengths. Like, I pass it to Gerianne. Like, what are some of the additional problems when it becomes all about personality? We've got cross-functional teams. We've got a lot going on. Like, what happens when it's all about personality?
I think you start to build silos, right? You start to have the data folks who like to work together and, people who tend to be introverts or who like to do a lot of research. And then you'll have the folks who like to be more extroverted, who might be more sales type people, because certain types of jobs tend to collect types of personalities. And you start to build silos in an organization, and then you start to have your culture break down. And you really need to have any organization that I've worked in over 30 years. And granted, it's only been, I think, 5 because I'm not a hopper. But it is critical for different departments to be communicating their messaging, what's happening in there, and, working, even spending time in those other departments, because that's how you understand the continuum of the work, and you can represent externally to people who are future customers and to people who just can help get the word out about your company. I believe that every person who works at the company can become an ambassador, right? I think that's the Apple theory, right? Is that everybody who works there can be a mouthpiece for the company if they're treated well and there is a good, strong culture. So, and that's where I believe that if you break down those silos and going by personality types and having people understand that to have a true cross-functional team, you need to have a team that is built of many different types of people, and understanding that the different personality types, the different skill sets, those are all different. They may be different personality types, but they're not necessarily different attitudes towards the work. People want to get the work done. They want to do a good job, and everybody wants to succeed. So that's not an attitude towards the work, and that's not a performance objective. It's a personality type, which helps to define how they're going to get the work done, but not necessarily if they're going to get the work done. So I think it really makes a big difference when leaders take a look at what's happening around them when they're forming task forces and, collaboratives and all these different pieces, to make sure that these are balanced, teams, and that everybody has got an opportunity to participate, because you're going to have certain people who raise their hand first every single time. And everybody deserves an opportunity to do that, because if you raise your hand first every time and you're the one doing it every time, you probably get the first promotion. And that leaves a whole sector of people who also are very deserving, who don't get those opportunities because they're not always the first to raise their hand. So there's a whole management piece of observation, interaction, and understanding of the people that you're working with in order to understand some of these personalities and how they can work together, so that you've got the whole team and people are achieving their personal goals and moving forward in, not just their personality, but as Brian was saying, in an authentic way too. If you're an introvert, you don't have to become an extrovert. You don't have to become, somebody who does a different type of work to move forward. No, you can be the best at what you do and you can move forward, but you need to have leadership that understands how this all works together.
This is so powerful. One thing that was an aha for me was just focusing on the shared vision. Brian, were you going to jump in?
If I could, yeah.
Please.
That's so powerful what Gerianne just shared. It made me think, sometimes I go through teams, I talk about the stages of unhealthy conflict. So there are stages to it. And anytime there's an unhealthy conflict, a clash, somebody's mad at somebody else, who knows, somebody maybe didn't give somebody credit in a meeting or didn't invite somebody to lunch, who knows, right? Gave me a funny look in the hallway. When we can't let that go and we don't look to rectify it, the next stage 2 is avoidance. Stage 2 is our brain saying, well, that hurt. I don't want that to happen anymore. So I'm going to stay away from that person, right? And just think about the damage just even that does in a company, right? Ben, if you and I are in the same company, we need to work together. We just get to stage 2, much less stage 9, right? We just get to stage 2 of avoidance, right?
Yeah.
Mission starts to suffer. So it is like so critical, everything Gerianne just said there, that, especially for our leaders, like you have to be on top of this stuff. You have to be with your people, understanding what's happening, understand the subtext, the context, so you can see when these little rifts start and sort of put them back together.
Nermine, put a bow on all this, because we're talking about shared mission, shared vision, and if we don't work in silos, having different personalities, having different strengths is a huge benefit, right? Put a bow on all that. It's actually a benefit for the organization.
Oh, absolutely. I love what Gerianne said. Really, everyone gets to be who they are. right? They get to bring their best. And from a strengths, strategic interdependence model, there's a point where we're talking about interdependence, right? Where everybody gets to bring the best of who they are to the space, and they get their needs met. And because I bring what I do when that serves the needs of someone else, and vice versa. So how do we strategically collaborate with each other and come to a place of interdependence? I think what Gerianne was describing with those silos can be called independence, where, yeah, we're seemingly being productive, but it kind of separated, where we're talking here strategically collaborating, and the leader is bringing everyone's strengths to the table, making sure people's needs are being met. A really special way to be able to bring everybody to that space is this concept of confident vulnerability. And it's not very often that we see those two words together, confidence and vulnerability. And confidence is knowing what I bring, knowing my strengths, knowing my weaknesses, knowing what I bring. And vulnerability is also knowing I don't bring it all. There are things that you have that I need. And being able to openly acknowledge that and ask for your input, ask for your participation, knowing what I bring to the table. And there's this, it holds this, I know what I am and I know what I'm not. And both are okay. So all of us, when we have that attitude where, yeah, I am confident. I know what I bring to the table. I know I don't have it all. I need what you have. And guess what? Both are okay. And my strengths can hold my lesser strengths. And what confident vulnerability allows us to do is embrace the strengths and weaknesses, contributions and needs of self and of others without judgment. And that's when we take the judgment out of the equation, we're all able to just be ourselves and contribute and achieve what we want together faster and better than we ever could have imagined.
I can tell you the best CEOs that I've worked with have mastered confident vulnerability, because they know exactly what they know, and they surround themselves with people who cover what they don't know. And it's beautiful to see. It really is.
We're going to close with two topics. We'll talk about misconceptions, and then we'll close. The final part of this discussion will be what we can do differently today to be a better leader. Before we get into that, there's one thing I never want to forget. I want to keep serving and supporting you guys. So we'll go round robin real quick. We'll start with Nermine. How can I'm going to put this in the notes for the listener to do. How can we serve and support you? How can we follow you, work with you, take an assessment, anything like that?
Thank you for that question, Ben. I would love if this resonates, if we're serving a need here that you're identifying, I'd love to offer up do the assessment. Come have a quick chat with me. I'll share a discovery call with you. And if someone's interested in more, just learning a little bit more, exploring the concept of strengths, I am doing monthly workshops, and we'll share some information about that too, for the folks that want to do a little bit more digging.
And I raised my hand and took the assessment. It's worth it. It'll be in the notes to get in touch with Nermine. Gerianne, how can we serve and support you?
Sure. Reaching out if somebody is interested in talking a little bit about being your authentic self, and where does that put you in the workplace and your future career. I find a lot of people that I talk to tend to feel stuck where they are and not where to go next. And I love having those conversations. So they can visit my website. They can sign up for, coffee with me, and, let's just sit and talk about that a little bit and see if you want to go further. But one thing I love to do is to really help people find their potential and find their happiness. And that's what makes me extremely happy. So I would love to help anybody out there who needs that.
Who doesn't want potential happiness plus coffee or tea? So that sounds great. We can click the link in the description. And Brian, how can we serve and support you as well?
Thanks, Ben. So maybe the best way for people to get in contact with me and sort of stay in touch is I have a free weekly newsletter called Lead the Way. And I go deep into leadership and culture and this sort of topic. So if you like this sort of discussion we've had here today, we send out some leadership thoughts on that every week, along with some other cool stuff that go on that newsletter. You can get that at brianrollo.com. Or if you find me on LinkedIn, there's a link in my profile to the newsletter too. So that's sort of a low friction way for people to sort of hang out, see how I approach things, and love to connect with people that way.
Yeah, who doesn't want some weekly thoughts and nuggets? That's a easy yes to have Brian in your email. So as I teased, I want to end with we'll give minimum one misconception about leadership, and then our final roundtable will be how we can be a better leader starting this moment, starting today. So, Brian, we'll start with you. What's one misconception that we maybe missed?
So if we're going to keep it around personality, so I'm going to go back to what I said before. And really, again, personality is tendency, not destiny. One of the reasons I found people hesitate to go into this personality assessment road, no matter what the assessment, is they sort of sometimes come out feeling labeled, right? Or they come out feeling like, Brian, you're saying I have to do this. So you're saying this is who I am. And we're not. We're helping you sort of get a little bit of self-awareness. So that's one thing I think, especially as a leader, to think about, both if you're going to use this for yourself and for your team. It's great to know people's strengths. It's great to know where their home base is, but don't let it limit you or them.
So good. Gerianne, one misconception.
I think a big misconception about leadership is that you have to manage the products and the logistics. It's about managing people and the teams, and you have to separate those two out. Your managers are there to help take care of the logistics and the programs. You're there to take care of your teams. And I think that's where what we're talking about is so important. And that's why the observation piece is so important. And, yes, there is some responsibility and accountability to make sure your managers are doing their jobs. But your job is to really take care of the people and the people leading those teams to make sure they have everything that they need and this type of learning.
We're in the people business. Nermine, one misconception.
I will go with that a specific personality type or specific strength is better geared to leadership than perhaps others. And in strengths-based leadership, the authors, what they did was they shared these firsthand accounts from some of the most successful organizational leaders in recent history, from the founder of Teach for America and the president of the Ritz-Carlton. And they discussed how their unique strengths have driven their success. And something really important to know is that it's not any one of the four domains of leadership or specific strengths. The point is that their success came from each of them being true to themselves, being true to who they are, by aligning how they contribute best, and not trying to be like anyone or anyone else. There's not one specific type that's geared to leadership. Every single one of us each of us is a leader in our own right in so many ways. And we are just coming back to what Gerianne talks about in authenticity. Be you and surround yourself with the people who do the things that don't come as naturally for you.
I'm envisioning like a t-shirt that says all strengths matter. I'd love that shirt.
I love that. Absolutely.
Write that down.
I am writing it down.
We'll go in the same, we'll go to Brian, and close us out, asking for a friend, literally asking for myself. What's one tip to be a better leader starting this moment today?
I'm going to give you that in a second, but is it okay if I back up and just comment on what Nermine said?
Yeah, I'm moving too quick. Please do
I love
comment.
it so much. I'm going to get myself in trouble here probably. So let's just keep this just between us. One of the things that drives me crazy, like on LinkedIn, is when people put up posts and they say, every leader is empathetic. Every leader is a great listener. Like that to me is sort of lazy, because I can point out a leader who wasn't maybe all that empathetic. And I can point out maybe a leader who wasn't that great of a listener, but they accomplished big things. Now, I believe in empathy. I believe in being a good listener. But let's be real. You can go out and find historical leaders who weren't that great at either of them and accomplish great things. So that's why I love Nermine's point. One of the things I always ask people when I do these assessments, if it's a leadership thing, what about this? What about what you discovered about yourself today makes you a great leader? And there's always something. So anyway. Thank you, Nermine. I hope you don't mind adding.
No, I love that. Thank you, Brian.
And my apologies to everyone who just posted on LinkedIn. Empathy makes you a great leader. So
I could go on such a long tangent on that too.
I know
Brian.
you and I have talked about this before, but
I could go on a 3-hour tangent, but there's something I call tactical empathy or tactical authenticity, where people pretend to be empathetic or pretend to be authentic in order to justify the means of them gaining what they want. But there's actually a misalignment with actually being real with the person. So I could go on a long tangent because people use it as like a marketing or leadership or sales skill. But if you don't feel it in your heart, to me, it just doesn't feel good.
not a tactic, right? It's not a trick. Anyway, that's maybe a whole another episode.
It's a whole nother episode. One thing to help Ben and the listener be a better leader right now, immediately.
Here's what I would say. And again, I hope this isn't too theoretical, but I think it's important to realize, and it sort of made me think the first time I heard it. Every business problem is a human problem. Every business problem you're ever going to encounter, I don't care if you're a one-person business or you're running, GE, every business problem is a human problem. When we think about how humans work together, when we address things from a level of human comprehension, we're going to solve a lot of business problems. And if you've got something that's not working, you drill down far enough, you're going to find a human problem that needs to be resolved.
So good. So true. Gerianne, one tip for today.
I will put it at along the lines of what Nermine said with confident vulnerability. Be vulnerable with your teams and learn from them, learn from the people. It is a compliment to them. It will give them the confidence to move up in the world. And it does you no bad to learn a little more.
No bad to learn more. Nermine, one thing for today.
Have the conversations. Ask, where do you love to contribute? Where would you like to do more? And what do you need in order to do it?
Have the conversations. And we can have a conversation with all of these three as early as right now by going to the show notes. Brian's got a fantastic newsletter that I'm subscribing to. Gerianne's going to help me be happy, and she's going to buy me coffee, or I can buy her. I'll buy her coffee is really what's going to happen, or a virtual chat. And Nermine and I have already done a strengths assessment, but I know you've done it twice, so I might end up doing the assessment twice myself. But I urge people, what's that face?
Oh, it's well, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
What comes out on a second round, but it's probably not necessary. But
but a first round is necessary with all three of these people. And I appreciate y'all coming to talk about this really nuanced topic today. So I do hope that the listener goes deeper with each and every one of you. And thanks for coming on the show. This was fun and productive. I had a good time.
Thank you.
We'll
all.
talk soon.